After selling my company for $30 million, I wanted to close out my working life with a cozy party, only to open the door to a spine-chilling nightmare. Just as we were about to raise our glasses, I caught my daughter-in-law sneaking a clear liquid into a chipped champagne flute, the one I've used for years. My heart stalled, but I kept smiling. When no one was looking, I swapped glasses with her mother, then stood there calmly and waited. 5 minutes later, her mother was foaming at the mouth and collapsing onto the stone floor, the shattering glass ringing out like a verdict. From that moment on, I knew it wasn't just one person who had fallen. My daughter-in-law's fate had been sealed by the very trap she never saw coming. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Miriam Blake, 70 years old, and I just sold the strategic consulting firm I spent 40 years building. $30 million, a number that makes most people dizzy, but to me it's the sum of youth, blood, tears, and loneliness. I thought I deserved a small party to thank the people who stood by me along the way. Turns out, that seemingly peaceful party was where someone planned to write my final goodbye. My son, Daniel, was the one who proposed the party. "Mom, let's celebrate properly," he said, voice sincere, those brown eyes lighting up like when he was a kid. "Kendra will handle everything." I smiled, not wanting to dampen Daniel's mood, even though something nagged at me. Kendra, Daniel's wife, has never been the housework type. A woman who considers loading the dishwasher beneath her dignity was suddenly eager to play hostess, planning every dish, every bouquet, every candle herself. That evening, our family home glowed like a summer gala. About 30 guests, friends, former partners, a few close neighbors. Light bounced off crystal glasses and the marble tabletop, making everything feel both elegant and warm. I wore the navy dress Daniel gave me last year and my work-in late husband's pearl necklace. I felt at peace until I saw Kendra watching me from the bar. She was smiling, a gentle smile I've never believed. As guests lifted their glasses, I turned and saw Kendra slip a small amber bottle from her purse. I knew instantly it wasn't perfume. She glanced around, then quickly dripped a clear liquid into the chipped champagne flute, the one only I ever choose at parties. In that instant, my heart clenched. The laughter, the music, the clinking glasses all went distant. I didn't scream, I didn't drop my glass, I just watched. Everything in my head clicked into a pre-drawn plan. If she dared to do this here, in front of dozens of people, she believed I'd never live to tell it. I smiled, pretending to listen to an old colleague's story about the company. When Kendra turned away just long enough to adjust her necklace, I quietly swapped my glass with her mother's. Lorraine Peterson was standing by the buffet, purse in hand, looking for someone to chat with. Lorraine is kind, naive, forgetful, and always trying to appear more refined than she is. She didn't notice when I set the glass right by her purse. 10 minutes later, as the toast began and glasses rose, I watched Lorraine take a sip and say, "Delightful taste, Sarah. Did you order this from somewhere special?" I didn't have time to answer. She froze. Her eyes went wide, her face drained, then she crumpled onto the stone floor. The glass smashed with a harsh crack amid the panic. White foam started bubbling at the corners of her mouth. People rushed in. Someone shouted, "Call 911!" Kendra screamed, hugging her mother. "Mom! Oh my God! Somebody help her!" She wept like her heart had shattered, shaking, frantic, a perfect performance. And Daniel, my son, was flustered, but I saw his eyes flick to his wife for a split second. A quick look, full of fear and quiet complicity. I knelt beside Lorraine and felt her pulse weakening. Chaos swirled around me, and I thought only one thing. If I hadn't seen that, I would be the one on this floor. When the EMTs arrived, I stepped back, perfectly calm. Kendra clung to her mother, sobbing, hands sticky with champagne, repeating, "She just collapsed. It was so sudden." I studied her face, not a single real tear. Daniel pulled me aside, voice trembling. "Mom, maybe you should rest. This must be a shock for you." I smiled gently. "I'm fine, dear. I've seen worse. I've lived through the corporate battlefield where every handshake can be a knife. Tonight was different, only in that the knife was held by family. As the ambulance took Lorraine away, Kendra stayed in character, the devastated daughter. But to me, everything was clear. When the flashing lights faded, I stood at the doorway with a chill down my spine, not from fear, but because I knew I'd just been warned. Kendra isn't just an unpleasant daughter-in-law. She's a failed killer. I went inside and poured a fresh glass from an unopened bottle. In the mirror, my face was composed, but my eyes had changed. I'm no longer the soft mother they could decide for. I'm Miriam Blake, the woman who once saved a company from collapse with a single contract. This time, I'll save my own life by starting the game under my rules. I wrote a few lines in the leather notebook on my desk. What Kendra poured tonight wasn't just poison, it was evidence. And I will turn that evidence into her sentence. Outside, the night wind rustled the maples, whispering a warning. I took a deep breath, shut the door, and smiled. My retirement party was over. But another game, survival and reckoning, had officially begun. The ambulance tore into the night, red and blue lights slicing across the villa's glass like knives carving through the last scraps of fake peace. I stood there for a few seconds, watching the strobes slip away beneath the tree-lined street, then grabbed my coat and purse. I knew if I let them go without me, all evidence would disappear by morning. Kendra was still sobbing on the porch, but her eyes were dry. Daniel stood beside her, phone buzzing nonstop, sneaking glances at me, the look of someone hiding something. "I'll ride with the ambulance," I said evenly. Kendra whipped around, breath hitching. "No need, Mom. Daniel and I will go. You're tired. Just go home and rest." I smiled, light as air. Lorraine is a close acquaintance. She collapsed in my home. I'm responsible. Daniel jumped in, voice a bit too pleading. "Mom, please, let us handle it. It's probably just a mild reaction." I looked straight at my son. Beneath the calm was panic. He didn't want me at the hospital because they needed time to cover a mistake. "No more discussion," I said, taking my keys. "I'll drive behind them." Both of them froze. I turned and walked off before they could answer. St. Mary's Hospital sits out on the edge of town, its pale hallway lights reflecting off cold tile. The smell of antiseptic mixed with wilting flowers at the front desk. I sat in the ER waiting area, arms folded, quietly watching. Kendra wasn't crying anymore. She stood to the side, hands trembling but eyes scanning the room, afraid to miss a detail. Daniel sat a few steps away, fingers interlaced, phone still buzzing, but he wouldn't pick up. Each vibration felt like an offbeat heartbeat in the hush. The ER door swung open. A middle-aged doctor stepped out, badge reading Dr. Matthews. "Mrs. Peterson is stabilizing," he said, calm but guarded. "We suspect plant poisoning, signs of an alkaloid in her blood." I tilted my head. "Meaning someone likely put something in her drink?" He glanced at me, then gave a small nod. "We can't confirm yet, but the signs are strong. This compound doesn't occur naturally in food." I heard Kendra's sharp, scared inhale. "No way! It must be the salad, or the cheese," she stammered. Dr. Matthews just made another note. "We'll send samples out." "We'll know soon." I set a hand on my chest and let out a little relieved sigh. Good thing she only had a few sips of champagne. If it had been more... Kendra went pale. Panic flickered across her face, then she dropped her gaze. Daniel avoided looking at me or the doctor. He nodded, voice off key. "Thank you, doctor. We just want my mother-in-law to be okay." "Of course," I said softly, but in my mind, every word and gesture was logged as living evidence. When they wheeled Lorraine out of the ER, I stepped closer. She was pale but breathing, arms dotted with IV marks. I brushed her hair back gently. Kendra hung back, unwilling to approach. Her lips were pinched, her eyes unfocused. I could almost hear the gears grinding as she hunted for an exit strategy. "She needs overnight observation," the doctor said. "We'll keep her for further checks." I nodded. "Good. I'll stay here with her." Daniel cut in immediately. "No, Mom. Go home and rest. Kendra and I will stay." I smiled at my son, that smile, the one that makes him look like a kid caught lying. "Daniel, did you forget? I never leave before a contract is signed." He opened his mouth, then shut it. Finally, he just nodded. That night, in the hospital waiting room, I sat with an old magazine while keeping my ears open. Near midnight, Kendra slipped outside to make a call. I followed at a distance and stopped a few yards back, behind a fake plant screen. "No, I told you. The glass had a tiny chip. It couldn't be a mistake," she whispered, voice shaking. "The doctor said alkaloid. I don't know how this happened. Maybe they mixed up the samples." Silence. He's still calm. "But what if she suspects?" I'd heard enough. Back at my seat, I took out my pen and wrote in the leather notebook, "Kendra said he's still calm. That means Daniel knows. They're in it together." I closed the book, leaned back, and exhaled slowly. No rage, no fear, just certainty. I was in the middle of a hunt, and I was the prey they had just lost track of. Near dawn, the doctor said Lorraine was out of immediate danger but needed more monitoring. Hearing that, Kendra covered her face and burst into tears as if redeemed. In her eyes, I saw only one thing: fear of being exposed. Daniel came over, voice gentle to the point of excess. "Mom, why don't you go home and rest? I'll stay with my mother-in-law. We've got a lot to handle tomorrow." I looked out the hospital window where the first light touched the empty parking lot. "No, I'll come along," I said evenly. "Someone nearly died in my home. If the police ask questions, I need the details." Daniel pressed his lips together. "No need, Mom. I'll talk to them." "Fine," I said. "But remember this, they'll ask why she drank the chipped glass, the one only I use. Don't look rattled when they do." He froze. Just a second, but enough. I turned and walked out before he could respond. Back home, the early light filtered through the window, washing the kitchen where it all began. The glasses were gone, but a faint champagne stain marked the stone counter. I didn't need forensics to know. Kendra had someone wipe down the scene. I poured myself a red from a freshly opened bottle, the scent of wine lifting into the cold morning air. I sat, opened the leather notebook, and wrote the first line of the war I was about to wage. Tonight, they made the biggest mistake of their lives. I paused, listening to the wall clock tick. It wasn't time passing anymore, it was a countdown. Because I, Miriam Blake, who has survived dozens of cutthroat deals, had started recalculating every move, every trap, every traitor under my own roof. And when this game ends, there will be only one true survivor. I never believed greed could make someone forfeit their humanity until I became the target. After that night at the hospital, I couldn't sleep. The lamplight pooled over the open page where my last line still glistened in fresh ink. They just made the biggest mistake of their lives. I sat there a long time, listening to the clock tick. The wind hissed through the doorframe, then poured a little more wine. In 70 years, I've faced opponents far shrewder than Kendra, people who preyed on pride, trust, even motherhood. But no one had been reckless enough to go for my life. And worse this time, it was family. I took the checkbook from the drawer and flipped through the pages. The ink was still bold, the handwriting neat. $15,000 for kitchen remodel in 2019. $25,000 temporary investment in Daniel's architecture firm in 2020. $50,000 to help buy the house in Westfield. Dozens of smaller items. Tuition for my grandchild. Birthday gifts. Help during a tough time. Added up, nearly $200,000, and that's only what I have paperwork for. There were countless calls when Daniel's voice was tight. "Mom, I need a few thousand to make payroll. Just temporary." I wired the money again, without asking why. What mother doesn't want to believe her son is just going through a rough patch? Now, staring at those cold numbers, I saw it clearly. I wasn't helping. I was funding their money habit. Kendra has never really worked. She runs a small jewelry boutique in a mall, selling only a few pieces a month, yet constantly bragging about booming revenue. Every visit she wore something new: a diamond bracelet, a Hermes bag, Louboutin heels. And Daniel, the boy who once sketched houses with a pencil, had become a man buried in debt, nodding along to every suggestion his wife made. I started digging quietly. A few old friends in finance owed me favors. It took one morning to get the full picture of my son and daughter-in-law's finances. The Westfield house had been refinanced 3 times in 4 years. 2 luxury cars, a BMW and a Mercedes, still on payments. 4 maxed-out credit cards, with total balances over $80,000. Daniel also took a commercial bank loan, using his own company as collateral, even though the business is nearly bankrupt. I looked at the report with a heavy heart. No more doubt they were sinking into a bottomless debt hole. And I, the trusting, generous mother, was their last funding source. The next morning, with the lights still weak, the phone rang. Kendra flashed on the screen. I picked up. "Good morning, Mom," her voice syrupy like she was swallowing panic. "I just wanted to ask, how are you feeling? Any fatigue or dizziness?" I sipped my coffee and answered evenly, "No, I feel better than ever." Silence for a few seconds, then a forced laugh. "I'm just worried after last night." Anyone would be shaken. "Of course," I said softly. "Good thing Lorraine only drank a little. If it had been my glass, you'd be talking to the police today." I heard her swallow. Her voice broke. You think it was the champagne?" "I don't think anything," I said and hung up. The air in the house suddenly grew heavy. I turned to the kitchen and stopped at the champagne bottle, still 3/4 full on the counter. The glass caught the morning sun, looking innocent, but I knew inside was the truth. I carefully put on gloves, slipped the bottle into a plastic bag, and set it in a separate fridge drawer. From now on, it wasn't a drink. It was evidence. Sitting in my study, I replayed every small detail. Kendra's eyes, her shaking hands when she saw me at the hospital, Daniel's eagerness to get me to go home and rest. There was no doubt anymore they miscalculated. They thought I'd be naive, die quietly, and leave a $30 million estate to be split cleanly under the old will. But what they didn't know, I've never walked away from the chessboard before. The match is over. I opened my computer and reviewed the sale documents. The wire sat intact in my bank account, uninvested, untouched. I remembered Daniel saying, "Mom, let me help you manage it. That's a lot of money. You should relax." I'd smiled then, thinking my son truly cared. Looking back, it was a setup. Kendra wanted control of the money. Daniel wanted to keep me within reach, and I was still playing the soft mother they thought they could manipulate. That noon, I went to the neighborhood supermarket for a few things, an excuse to walk and think. People say old age brings fear of loneliness. Maybe. But I'm not afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of trusting the wrong person. On the way back, I stopped at a small copy shop run by a former employee of mine. "I need a few documents duplicated," I said, placing a sealed envelope on the counter. He looked up, recognizing me. "This seems important, Mrs. Blake. Let's call it a contingency," I said with a thin smile. Back home, I opened the door and felt the house go unfamiliar. A place once full of laughter now sat silent and cold. I looked around. The kitchen, the living room, the stairs, each corner holding a memory. But now, those memories were shadowed by betrayal. I poured another glass of wine, sat at the table and clicked my pen. Daniel owes the bank. Kendra spends like a queen. House refinanced 3 times. 2 luxury cars unpaid. Credit cards past due. Debt on top of debt. They can't wait for me to die naturally. They chose the shortest and stupidest path. I closed the notebook, my chest cooling. When I was young, I lost a deal because I trusted the wrong partner. I swore I would never let anyone kill me with my own trust again. This time it isn't the marketplace. This time it's the family. Battlefield. At sunset, the house sank into a soft orange glow. I stood by the window, watching my reflection in the glass. The woman in the mirror had silver hair and tired eyes, but behind them was absolute clarity. I set my hand on the leather notebook and whispered, like a vow, "This isn't suspicion anymore. This is a survival campaign. Kendra may think she's won a small round. But she forgot I've survived people 100 times smarter than she is, and when this play ends, the one exiting the stage won't be me." The next morning, I drove downtown to the familiar red brick building on Maple Avenue, the office of Thomas Keegan, my attorney for over 20 years. He's the one I trust completely. Discreet, meticulous, always 3 steps ahead. Inside, it smelled of coffee and old leather from the Chesterfields, light streaming through big windows onto neat stacks of files. Keegan looked up as I entered, surprise and concern crossing his face. "Miriam," he said, warm and measured. "It's been a while since you dropped by unannounced. What's going on?" I sat, took off my gloves, and met his eyes. "Thomas, I need your help, and this time it's not about contracts or equity. It's about my life." He paused, then set his pen down. "Tell me." I told him everything, every detail, the party, the chipped flute, Kendra's hand pouring the clear liquid, Daniel's shaken stare, Lorraine collapsing on the stone. I left nothing out. When I finished, the room went quiet. Keegan braced his hands on the desk, thinking hard. "You're certain you saw Kendra put something in the glass?" "I don't doubt my eyes, Thomas," I said, cool and firm. "But I also know if I only accuse without proof, I'll be dismissed as paranoid." He nodded. "Correct. You can't accuse attempted murder without chemical evidence. The champagne bottle, you still have it? It's in a separate fridge drawer. No one's touched it. Good. However." He looked up, gaze turning serious. "I'm afraid this won't stop there. If they sense your suspicion, they may pivot to a legal attack." I frowned. "Meaning?" "They can petition the court for guardianship, claim you're incompetent due to age or memory issues. Then all assets, including that $30 million, would be controlled by the guardian, and guess who the court would look to first?" I understood at once. "Daniel?" Keegan nodded. "With your very crafty daughter-in-law behind him." I leaned back, hearing my own heartbeat not from fear but anger. I've battled infamous CEOs, been sued to force a price cut, been threatened with bankruptcy, but no one has ever dared label me mentally unfit. "I won't let them," I said, my voice rough with restraint. "And you won't be alone," Keegan replied. He opened a leather notebook, wrote a few lines, then looked up. "We need a 3-layer strategy. Hit directly, defend tightly, and leave an unbreakable legal footprint. Layer 1, independent mental evaluation. You need a capacity assessment by a senior psychiatrist," Keegan said. "Not their hospital and independent clinic, notarized and sealed. If anyone later claims you're incompetent, we'll have official proof dated beforehand." I nodded. "I'll do it now. Send a copy to you and to the Asset Management Bank. Layer 2. Update the will and establish a trust." Keegan pulled a file from the drawer. "Your old will still makes Daniel the primary heir. That shouldn't stand. I recommend a trust assets only disperse under conditions you set. For example, a small yearly stipend, and full forfeiture to charity if the beneficiary commits a crime or comes under criminal investigation. I gave a thin smile. Fitting for our circumstances. Exactly. We'll also add a clause. If anyone attempts to have you declared incompetent, the trust automatically voids their inheritance. Rights. That's layer 2. Warmth returned to my chest. For the first time in days, I felt control. Layer 3. Personal security system. You live alone, right? Keegan asked. Yes. Then we need a professional security firm. I know a team that works with high-net-worth seniors' cameras, motion sensors, a panic button direct to police. They can also test food and drinks periodically. If someone tries a second time, they won't get it. I looked at him, the window's dim light touching the face of the man who helped me through dozens of lawsuits, now drawing up a plan to keep me alive. I never thought, I said softly, that 70 would start with protecting myself from my own child. Keegan closed his notebook, voice steady. Miriam, don't let emotions lead. People kill in many ways: knife, poison, or even silence. The only way to survive is to confront it. We stayed 2 hours to complete the preliminary filings. I signed each page: new will, medical directives, a limited financial power of attorney, all notarized on site. Keegan said he'd send copies to the bank vault and the asset management firm in the morning. As he set the pen down, I saw my reflection in the conference table glass. A silver-haired woman, face lined by time, eyes bright, cold, unshakable. I stood, grabbed my bag, and shook his hand. Thank you, Thomas. I was afraid, but not anymore. He smiled, gaze firm. You don't need to be afraid. They do. Outside, a fall breeze moved through the turning maples. I walked slowly to my car, feeling something both strange and familiar rise in me, the feeling of fighting for myself. As I settled into the driver's seat, I looked in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back wasn't a frail old lady anymore. She was someone who'd built an empire from nothing, and this time she was gearing up for the biggest counterattack of her life. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Sunlight slipped through the white curtains and pooled on the glossy hardwood, the same spot where Daniel used to play as a boy. Today, this house wasn't a refuge, it was a fortress. At exactly 8 a.m., the security team Thomas Keegan recommended arrived. 3 men in light gray uniforms worked carefully, without small talk. They installed mini cameras at every entry, the hallway, and the living room. Motion sensors were tucked discreetly behind framed art and bookcases. In the coffee table, they set a hidden panic button under the wood surface. One tap would send an alert straight to the police. All data goes to a private cloud. Only you have access, the lead tech said, voice low and steady. I nodded, signed the work order, and watched them pack up. In the hushed house, only the porch leaves whispered in the wind. I touched the button hidden under the table, a feeling of safety tinged with bitterness. At 70, I never thought I'd need this system to protect me from my own family. That afternoon, a courier from Keegan's office brought a thick envelope stamped with a red seal. I sat at my desk, hands slightly shaking as I opened it. Inside were my new will, trust documents, and medical directives, everything finalized, signed, and properly certified. Each page felt like both relief and heartbreak. I read slowly, stopping at the asset distribution. Daniel Blake, a fixed stipend of $50,000 per year, for life, non-transferable. Kendra Blake, no inheritance of any kind. The remainder, including all accounts, equity, real estate, and proceeds from the company's sale, goes to the National Cancer Research Fund and the Elder Financial Abuse Support Organization. I sighed. Not out of regret, but because a mother had finally cut the last thread of illusion. I murmured to myself, Son, I'm still giving you enough to live, but no longer enough to hurt anyone. That afternoon, I called Daniel and Kendra to invite them over for tea. I kept my voice light, as if I wanted to smooth the air. Kendra brightened immediately. "That's wonderful, Mom. I was just about to bring some macarons. We could all use a little break after these tense days." I smiled into the phone. "Exactly, dear." Maybe it's time we spoke plainly just once. Before they arrived, I brewed mint tea and added some butter cookies to the tray. On the table, between the white porcelain pot and the crystal cups, I placed a blue folder, an unsealed copy of the new will, no red stamp, but enough to make a point. I wanted to test their reactions. When the doorbell rang, I was ready. Daniel came in first, trying to act casual. Kendra followed, floral dress neat, light makeup but lips a little dry. She forced a smile when she saw me. "You look great, Mom," she said. "Such a relief to see you doing better." "Thank you, dear. I'm fine," I replied, pouring tea. We sat around the table. The silence was so tight the spoon against the cup sounded loud. I smiled gently and dropped the line as if offhand. "By the way, I updated my will and the legal paperwork yesterday." The spoon slipped from Daniel's hand with a small clink that rang in my ears. Kendra froze, her cup suspended midair. "The will?" she asked with a strained smile. "Do you think that's necessary?" "Everything's fine as it is." "Of course, but I'm not getting any younger." "I just want everything in order," Daniel spoke up, trying to keep his voice level. "So, did you change much?" I looked at them, still easy as if we were talking weather. "Not much. I just think some places need the help more. I chose a few trustworthy charities." They glanced at each other, panic flashing too fast to hide. I saw Kendra's hand pinch the hem of her dress. The air thickened. Then, like reading from a script, Kendra found her smile again and spoke in that syrupy, faux gentle tone. "Mom, I understand wanting to do something meaningful. But Daniel and I really worry about you living alone like this. After what happened, don't you feel scared?" I sipped my tea, calm. "No, this house holds a lot of memories. I feel safer here than anywhere. But if something happens, who would know?" Daniel cut in. "We've been talking. Maybe you should consider a place like Cedar Ridge. It's not a nursing home, Mom. It's a senior resort medical staff, security, everything you could need." Kendra jumped in smoothly. "Exactly, Mom. They have a golf course, a spa, arts programs. It's like a 5-star resort. The only thing is, to secure a good spot, there's an entrance fee of about $400,000. But don't worry, we'll handle the paperwork." I tilted my head, feigning thought. 400,000? Sounds reasonable. For people planning to stay there forever. Kendra's smile went stiff. Daniel cleared his throat and shifted. "We just want you safe. After what happened to Mrs. Lorraine, we don't want anything worse." "Yes," I said quietly, eyes settling on their cups. "Anything worse." They both looked at me, but I only smiled and lifted my cup, ending the topic. The conversation wore a peaceful skin, but every glance carried a fuse. When they stood to leave, Kendra wrapped her arms around me, her perfume cloying sweet to the point of fake. "I'm glad you're open to considering Cedar Ridge," she said. "We only want what's best for you." I patted her shoulder lightly. "I'll think on it. Big plans need time." Her smile held tight. Daniel kept his eyes down. They left in silence. I closed the door and walked to the small control panel on the wall instead of going back to the living room. On the camera screen, I saw them by the car in the driveway. The wind lifted Kendra's skirt hem, but her face was stormy. She jabbed a finger at Daniel, speaking fast. He shook his head and slammed his fist on the plast. "Wheel." They argued hard enough that I could read the words on their lips. "You promised she'd sign. You lied to me. Keep it down. The neighbors can see." I watched them and felt no pain anymore, only something cold and definite. They weren't regretful. They were afraid of losing. On the screen, the car finally rolled through the gate. As they left, I looked at the camera feed and saw two people who'd pretended to love me, bickering like botched accomplices. I didn't feel joy, only relief. And you, if you stood where I stood and saw that naked truth, what would you feel first? Pain or relief? Tell me in the comments. Maybe we'll find the answer together. I sat back down and touched the still warm cup. A thought cut clean and sharp as a blade. They think I'm weak, but the only weak thing in this house is their honesty. I smiled slightly. The game had only just begun. 3 days after that tea, a fine rain fell, the sky draped in silver gray like mourning cloth over the rooftops. I was rereading the trust paperwork when the doorbell rang. On the camera, I saw Lorraine Peterson, Kendra's mother, standing under the awning in a wrinkled raincoat, face pale, eyes uncertain. I opened the door. "Good Lord, Lorraine," I said softly. "You shouldn't be out like this." She offered a weak smile, lips cracked. "I had to come. I need to speak privately, Miriam." I brought her in and made hot ginger tea. In the light, I could see she'd grown thinner, with dark half-moons under her eyes like someone who hadn't slept in days. Her hands trembled around the cup. "What did the doctor say?" I asked. "Mild poisoning," she said, voice catching. "They suspect a foreign substance, some alkaloid, but Kendra told me it was just a reaction to vitamin supplements." I studied her. "Do you believe her?" Lorraine shook her head slowly. "No. I remember a few things, Miriam. I remember holding the champagne glass, tasting something strange, bitter, metallic. Earlier, I saw her at the drink table with a small amber bottle in her hand. I didn't think anything of it until I woke up in the hospital. The room went still. Rain ticked on the eaves like a metronome. I set my cup down and met her eyes. "Lorraine, I'm going to say something and I need you to stay calm." She swallowed and gripped the cup. "Go on." That champagne was originally mine. I saw Kendra pour something clear into it, and I switched glasses with you. Lorraine went rigid. Her face blanched, then shook. A tear fell and shattered on the table like rain on glass. "Oh my God," she whispered. "She meant to kill you, and I almost died in your place." I nodded, voice low. "I know. And I'm sorry, Lorraine." I didn't expect her to act in a crowded room, but because she did, I saw her true face. She shook her head, tears spilling. "I'm her mother, Miriam. I gave birth to her, raised her. I thought she was just greedy, not capable of murder. God. I never imagined I'd say these words about my own daughter." I set a hand on her shoulder. "This isn't your fault. But if we stay silent, she'll keep going. Next time it might be me or someone else." She looked at me, pain hardening into resolve. "What do you want to do?" "I want to expose Kendra with truth and evidence. Not just to protect me, but to stop her from hurting anyone else." I stood and took a leather notebook from the drawer. On the newest page, I'd written a few spare lines. Kendra motive, financial. Daniel passive accomplice. Evidence, champagne bottle, Lorraine's testimony. I looked up. "Will you testify if needed?" Lorraine gazed out at the rain streaking the glass. After a long moment, she nodded. "I can't cover for her anymore. She has to face what she's done. If you need me, I'll testify." Her words cracked through the quiet like thunder. My nose stung not from fear, but from the sudden certainty I wasn't alone anymore. That afternoon, after Lorraine left, I sat at the desk, opened my contacts, and found Naomi Pierce, a name Thomas Keegan had mentioned. Naomi is a private investigator who's worked with major corporations, specializing in money laundering and financial fraud. When she answered, her voice was husky and crisp. "Pierce Investigations. This is Miriam Blake. Thomas Keegan referred me. I need a financial investigation on my son Daniel and his wife Kendra." She didn't ask why. Can you send me their addresses, any account info, or businesses they've owned? I have everything. They're in debt, and I need to know what they've hidden. I want every loan, credit card, contract, life insurance policy, especially anything with my name on it. Naomi replied quickly. Understood. Give me 48 hours. I'll find it. That evening, a text arrived from Lorraine. I spoke to the doctor. He confirmed what was in my blood could not be a vitamin. I'm ready whenever you are. I read it and felt something unclench in my chest. For the first time since that fateful party, hope had a shape. I opened my notebook and wrote, "An ally has appeared and I'm not fighting alone this time. Lorraine, witness. Naomi, investigator." The counterstrike now has form. That night, strong wind swept over the roof, and the scrape of dry leaves along the porch sounded like someone whispering outside. I turned off the lights and stood by the window looking out at the yard. The black pines were still in the dark, rain glittering under the street lamp. I remembered Kendra's face at the tea, the calculating eyes behind mascara, the voice smooth as honey laced with poison. There was a time I tried to love her, for Daniel's sake. I once believed that if you were generous enough, people would change. But some people, the more you forgive them, the more they think they're entitled to betray you. Now I have no room for that softness. I'll let justice speak for me. Before bed, I pulled up the camera feeds. The side porch angle showed Lorraine's old car as she left, her figure small but steady in the rain. A warmth crept into me, a feeling I thought I'd lost long ago. Trust. I turned off the screen, set the leather notebook by the bed, and murmured, "Thank you, Lorraine." We'll end this on the terms of women who were underestimated but know how to rise. Outside, the rain kept falling, each drop on the tile roof like a drumbeat for a new battle. And inside me, fear gave way to the calm of someone ready to land the first strike. The next morning I called Daniel, my voice slightly shaky like a tired mother. "Do you have time at lunch? I want to eat with you, at the old place." The old place was the Pine House, the little restaurant by the lake where Daniel took me to dinner after college graduation. Back then, he was a gentle boy with bright eyes and big dreams. I wanted to see that version of him again, or at least make him believe I still did. The restaurant hadn't changed. Oak tables, old landscape paintings on the walls, the scent of mushroom soup in the air. Daniel arrived on time in a gray shirt and brown leather jacket, trying to mask the fatigue the dark circles gave away. "You called so suddenly, I got worried," he said, a mix of care and caution in his voice. I smiled lightly. "It's nothing, I just rethought a few things. Maybe you're right. I need rest. I can't live alone forever." His eyes lifted, a flicker of hope. "You mean you're considering Cedar Ridge?" I nodded, sipping tea. "Yes." I looked at a few photos. "It seems peaceful. Maybe I need a place like that to be quiet." Daniel brightened. "I knew it. It's great there, Mom. I have a friend who consulted for them, very professional. Let me send you their website." He pulled out his phone, tapped fast, then sent me the link to Cedar Ridge Retirement Residence. The lead image was a green lawn, smiling seniors by a lake, a piece so perfect it felt fake. "I can help with the paperwork," Daniel said, energized. "Just a few forms." "You won't have to worry." I gave a practiced smile and laid my hand on his wrist like a moved mother. "You really are a devoted son. I just worry the paperwork's fussy. Maybe I need someone younger to handle it." Daniel jumped at it. "Then let me take care of it." By late afternoon, as the light faded, Daniel and Kendra showed up at my door holding a file nearly 2 inches thick in a brown leather cover. They said they'd just come from a senior placement consulting office. Kendra smiled, playing the part of a helpful daughter-in-law guiding a confused elder. "I brought everything for you to sign now, so Cedar Ridge can process it tomorrow. You only need to fill a few spots." I led them to the living room. They opened the stack on the sofa. There were forms for admission, medical care commitments, insurance, and a thick document clipped separately. I glanced at the first page and saw the bold header, Power of Attorney, POA. I looked up at Daniel and asked slowly, "What's this?" "I've never heard Cedar Ridge requiring this." He answered fast, like he'd rehearsed, "Oh, it's just for convenience. If you're there and need someone to manage your bank accounts or handle medical bills, I can do it for you. You won't have to deal with it." I turned to page 2. My eyes stopped on a bolded paragraph. The agent may access, manage, transfer, execute, or alter any financial accounts, investments, real property, or inherited assets of the principal. I looked up with a thin smile. "Son, this looks like everything I own would fall under your control." Kendra jumped in, syrupy voice over ice. "Not exactly, Mom. It's just to reassure Cedar Ridge. Seniors there usually have a POA for their kids to avoid headaches later. You should let someone younger help." I smiled gently, as if flustered. "I understand, but I'm a little worried. If I change my mind one day, could you give the authority back?" Daniel paused half a beat, then nodded quickly. "Of course, Mom. We only want to help. You don't think we want anything else, do you?" The question sounded light, but his eyes tightened. I tilted my head, set the file on the table, and feigned thought. "Let me read every section carefully. I just want to be sure everything's proper. You know I've worked hundreds of contracts. The habit of reading closely is hard to shake." Kendra's smile pinched. "Of course. But Cedar Ridge fills up fast, so sooner is better." "I'll review it tonight and call you tomorrow," I said, soft but firm. They exchanged a worried look, then stood reluctantly. At the door, Kendra kept smiling. "I know you'll love Cedar Ridge. The lake is beautiful." "Good," I said. "Tomorrow I'll see exactly how deep that lake is." As the door clicked shut, I went straight to my office, plugged in my phone, and dialed Thomas Keegan. He answered almost instantly. "Miriam? What's going on?" I laid it out cleanly, every detail of the file, the POA, how Daniel spoke, and especially Kendra's manner. Thomas was quiet for a few seconds, then spoke slowly. "They're playing their final card, Miriam. If you sign, they can move your assets out of your control in a few hours." "I know. But I need to run this game with their own piece." "What do you have in mind?" "I want you to draft a dummy POA, identical in look to the real one, with one small change, legal value of $1, and authority limited to symbolic scope." "I'll sign it in front of them." Thomas let out a short laugh, admiring and worried at once. "You're staging a very risky play. I've spent a lifetime in others' plays. It's time. I direct one." After hanging up, I looked at the thick file on the table. The leather still carried Kendra's perfume, the scent now cloying and dangerous. I put on gloves, photographed every page, every signature block, every footnote, then sealed the copies in an envelope for Naomi Pierce in the morning. Outside, the drizzle blurred the streetlights. I turned on the desk lamp and sat in the quiet, cold, and clear-headed. No room for feelings now, only moves. Before bed, I opened my notebook and wrote a single firm line. "They think I'm prey. But Cedar Ridge will be the lure, and the power of attorney the trap." I closed the book, turned off the light, and let the house sink into dark stillness. Only the steady rain on the porch remained like a countdown to a counterstrike taking shape. 2 days later, at 7 a.m., my inbox pinged from Naomi Pierce. Subject: Financial Report. Urgent Blake Investigation. I slid my glasses up and opened the attachment. Inside was a 14-page report, typed down to the penny, the bold first line reading, "Financial condition and suspicious asset behavior, Daniel and Kendra Blake." I read slowly, line by line. The farther I went, the colder I felt. The Westfield house has been refinanced 3 times in 4 years. Current credit card debt, $82,400. Available bank balance, $1,120. I stopped at the underlined section. On August 14th, Kendra Blake took out a life insurance policy worth $500,000. Insured, Miriam Blake. Sole beneficiary, Kendra Blake. My hand clenched the desk edge. The room tilted for a second. Kendra had gone that far, $500,000 on my death. Below, Naomi had added, recurring payments found to Dr. Calvin Rooker, geriatric psychiatrist, previously accused of diagnosing on demand in the Langmore inheritance case in 2018. Payer, Daniel Blake. I leaned back and let out a dry laugh. I understood everything. They didn't just want me out of my home, they wanted me declared incompetent, legally controlled, then gone quietly. That afternoon, I took a printed copy to Thomas Keegan's office. He read in silence, tapping the pen tip on the desk. When he finished, he took off his glasses and exhaled. "I've seen this play," Thomas said, voice heavy. "Move the elder into a facility, use a sham diagnosis to get court-appointed guardianship. Once that paper's signed, you're done. They can sell the house, empty the accounts, even raid the trust before you can react." I sat quiet. The curtains stirred in a draft. "Thomas," I said softly, "you asked if I was scared. Here's my answer. I'm scared, if I do nothing." He looked up, eyes firm. "Then what's the plan?" I set the report on the desk, my finger landing on Dr. Rooker's name. "They'll be here tomorrow morning with the contracts and the POA. I'll let them think I'm trapped. But in truth," I met Thomas's eyes, "they'll be signing my trap." A slow smile spread across his face. "I should be present to witness this, shouldn't I?" "Of course, and I want one more person, someone who can officially verify everything." "Who are you thinking?" "Inspector Ava Nolan," I said. "She worked the Lakeport estate fraud case. She covers this area now." Thomas nodded immediately. "I'll call her. If the champagne bottle is still preserved, this is the moment to test it." That night, the house felt unusually quiet. Pine resin scented the hall. I opened the fridge and took out the champagne bottle still wrapped in plastic since the party. A thin sweat of condensation coated the glass, seals unbroken. I set it on the table and stared. All these days, this mute thing had been a silent witness. Tomorrow, it would speak. At exactly 8 p.m., Thomas texted, "Ava confirmed. She'll be there in the morning. Everything's ready." I replied simply, "Good. 9 o'clock they'll arrive. I'll invite them to sign." Then I set the phone down and lit a small candle. The wavering flame washed the notebook page where I wrote, "Cedar Ridge, the sweet bait. Dr. Rooker, a knife hidden in a white coat. But tomorrow morning Justice will wear a real lab coat." That night I didn't sleep. I made coffee, turned on the desk lamp, and read Naomi's report page by page. Every number, every transaction was a well-sharpened blade, and now I knew exactly where it was aimed. Naomi had attached 2 blurry photos, one of Kendra meeting a silver-haired man in glasses at a cafe near the hospital, Dr. Rooker. The second was a transfer receipt, $2,500 sent by Daniel to Rooker's account, note line, "Consultation retainer." I remembered Thomas's words, "They're writing your obituary in advance." "Miriam," I answered softly. "Then I'll make them read it first." At dawn I put on a light gray suit, tied back my silver hair, and wore the pearl strand Graham my husband once gave me. I didn't want to look like a victim. I wanted to look like the owner of the biggest deal of my life. At 8:30 my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "We're on the way. Bringing the contracts so you can sign." I smiled and replied, "Good, I've made coffee. See you at 9. Right after I texted Thomas, "Arrive 10 minutes early. Back doors open. And to Ava Nolan, need to test the bottle and witness the transaction. 9 o'clock sharp." Both answered, "Understood." Before 9 to 10, I reset the living room table. 2 cups of coffee, and the dummy POA packet, Thomas had prepared a perfect twin of the real contract with one tiny change. In the legal value section, he'd neatly inserted symbolic agreement in the amount of $1 US, void for any financial transactions exceeding personal limits. I set that file on the table next to the neatly wrapped champagne bottle. Looking at the scene, I couldn't help remembering the night of the fateful party where it all began with a glass of wine. Only this time, I was the one pouring. Outside, a car approached. A moment later, the doorbell rang. On the camera, Daniel and Kendra stood there, well-dressed, faces stretched between eagerness and fear. I took a breath, straightened my collar, and whispered to myself, "It's time." They think they're winning, but this morning, history will record who wrote the script. I opened the door with a gentle smile. "Come in, you two." "I'm ready." At exactly 9 a.m. My house was flooded with morning light. Sunbeams slid across the oak table where the Cedar Ridge packet sat neat and tidy. Fresh coffee mingled with the pine scent, making the scene look peaceful to the point of fake. Daniel and Kendra sat across from me. Daniel held a pen, his hand trembling slightly. Kendra opened her laptop, typing nonstop, glancing up to smile now and then. "Mom, are you sure you want to do this today?" Daniel asked, voice rough with nerves. I smiled, light as air. "The sooner the better, honey. I'm tired. Let's say I trust you and want you to handle all the fussy paperwork." Kendra shot Daniel a bright look. "See, I told you. Mom needs rest, and Cedar Ridge is perfect." I slid the packet toward them. "Here, I've signed everything. The power of attorney too notarized this morning." Daniel looked at me, genuinely moved in a way that felt fake. "Mom, thank you. I promise I'll take good care of you." He pressed pen to paper and signed the acknowledgement. The ink ran smooth, his handwriting shaky. Kendra immediately entered the info, murmuring account numbers. I caught the corner of her mouth lift, the kind of smile you only see on people who think they've already won. I took a sip of coffee and said evenly, "Oh, by the way, my lawyer is stopping by to confirm some tax forms. Won't take long." Kendra kept smiling, unfazed. Even better, things go faster when someone can verify. The doorbell chimed ding-dong just as I set down my cup. I glanced at the wall clock. 9:07 a.m. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. Inspector Ava Nolan was there with two uniformed officers, nameplates flashing in the sunday. In her hand were a sealed manila envelope and a clear evidence pouch. "Good morning, Mrs. Blake," Ava said, calm and firm. "We have the county tox lab results." I nodded. "Please come in." "This is the right time." She stepped into the living room with the two officers behind her. Daniel jumped to his feet. Kendra froze, fingers snapping her laptop shut. "What's going on?" Daniel asked, his voice shaking. Is there a problem?" Ava opened the envelope and pulled out a report. "We tested the champagne Mrs. Blake provided. Results confirm the presence of oleander extract, nerve toxic, potentially rapidly fatal." The air thickened. I could hear my heartbeat and the wall clock counting off long seconds. Ava continued, voice steady. "Notably, among the glasses recovered, the chipped one identified by Mrs. Blake as hers contained the highest concentration. 4 times the level found in the remaining wine." Daniel's eyes bulged, his face going ashen. Kendra went rigid, hands knotted in her lap. I stood and spoke low, each word clear. "I saw her pour a clear liquid from a small amber bottle into that glass before the party started. And when I feigned turning away, she thought no one noticed." Ava glanced at me and gave a slight nod. She took out another sheet and held it up to Kendra. "This is a copy of a life insurance policy for $500,000 on Mrs. Miriam Blake, sole beneficiary Miss Kendra Blake. Policy dated 3 weeks before the incident." Kendra's face drained white. She stammered, It was for safety, I didn't, Ava cut in firm. Miss Kendra Blake, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used as evidence in court. The two officers stepped forward. One read the advisement. You're under arrest for attempted premeditated murder and elder abuse. Please stand and place your hands behind your back. Kendra sprang up, screaming, No, this is a setup. I didn't do anything. Daniel, say something. Daniel sat paralyzed, staring at his wife, then at me. Mom, he whispered, as if he couldn't believe it. You knew. All of it? I looked straight at him, my voice soft but steel hard. From the very first second, son. The officers cuffed Kendra and led her down the hall. Her golden hair hung limp, her face twisted with tears and fear. Her heels struck the marble cold, hard echoes on the same floor where another woman had collapsed from a poisoned drink. Just before the door, Kendra whipped around, shrieking like she'd lost her mind. You'll pay for this, Miriam, I swear. The door slammed, cutting off everything. Silence fell. Morning light still spilled through the window, but it no longer felt clean. It lit Daniel's face and laid bare the collapse. He sank onto the sofa, head in his hands, voice breaking. Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you let it go this far? I sat across from him, my eyes gentler. Son, if I'd said it early, who would have believed me? The police? Or you, the man who still thought his wife was perfect? Daniel said nothing. I went on. Do you know why I switched the glasses? Because in that split second when I saw Kendra's eyes, I knew that woman wasn't the person I once trusted to marry my son. She looked at me like a number on a balance sheet. And you let her lead you. Tears fell. Daniel bowed his head. I was stupid. No, just blind, I said softly. Luckily, justice isn't. Ava stepped closer and laid a hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Blake, thank you for staying steady and cooperating. The bottle you preserved is key. Because of it, we could arrest Kendra today. I nodded with a small smile. Thank you, Inspector Nolan, and send my thanks to Naomi, the woman brave enough to bring light to the dark. Ava smiled back. We'll keep digging into Dr. Rooker. He'll have to answer for those diagnoses for hire. Let the law do its part, I said. My part is forgiveness, but not forgetting. When they left, it was just Daniel and me. I walked to the window. Outside, the early breeze moved through the pines. The leaves whispering like grateful spirits finally cleared. Daniel came closer and spoke quietly. Mom, I'm sorry. I let her hurt you. I don't deserve. I turned and set my hand on his shoulder. You're still my son, but from today on, you have to find yourself again not with money, but with character. He nodded, eyes red. I looked at the table where the dummy POA still lay, the paper edge catching the sundae. I picked it up, tore it slowly, and fed it to the fireplace. Flames rose, bright and clean. We don't need papers to bind family, I said softly. If someone needs a document to love, love was never what they wanted. Outside, the patrol cars faded into the distance, carrying off the morning chill. I poured another cup of coffee and watched the fire settle. In the bottom of the cup, the dark brown swirled into a spiral like my life, pulled into a vortex of betrayal, yet still finding a way out. I exhaled and closed my eyes. A dark chapter had shut, and in the quiet, I heard my own voice whisper, They thought they could bury me with a scheme. But I'm still here, clear-eyed, free, and alive to tell my own story. After the police left, the house fell into a suffocating, heavy stillness. Outside, the patrol sirens thinned into the wind. Morning light spread across the floor, like a thin fog, and reflected onto Daniel's face, stunned, pale, wet with tears. He collapsed onto the sofa, hands over his head, shaking like someone waking from a nightmare. Mom, he said softly, voice choking. I didn't know. I thought it was just to scare you into signing. I didn't think she'd really try to kill you." I stood a few steps away, looking at the son I once trusted completely. Old memories, the boy running through the yard, the young man holding me after his father died, flashed and evaporated like smoke. "Did you know what she was doing?" I asked, calm and cold. Daniel didn't answer. I stepped closer and held out my hand. "Give me your phone." He hesitated. I looked into his eyes and said, gentle but final, "Do you want to make it right or hide more?" At last, Daniel pulled the phone from his pocket and set it on the table. I picked it up. His fingerprint unlocked the screen. In the messaging app, dozens of conversations between him and Kendra popped up. I skimmed quickly and stopped at a thread near the time of the party. "Kendra, after tonight, your mom will have to beg us." Daniel, "Don't go too far." Kendra, "Sometimes, to get freedom, someone has to sleep deep for a bit." Daniel, "I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want Mom to understand I need some control too." When I finished reading, my heart clenched, but my face didn't change. "What do you think scare means, Daniel? Pouring poison into your mother's wine and calling it scaring her?" He bent over, tears falling onto his hands. "I was stupid. I believed her. She said she only wanted to scare you, so you'd hand over control of the money. She said you were too strict, never giving me a chance to do anything." I was silent for a moment, then pulled the file on the table and set it in front of him. "This is Naomi Pierce's report. Everything's in there: mortgage stacking, credit card debt, and shady spending. Which part do you want to see first?" His hands trembled as he turned the pages. When he reached payments to Dr. Calvin Rooker, his eyes went wide. "She really paid Rooker?" I nodded. "Yes. And Rooker is a geriatric psychiatrist. She hired him to certify that I'm legally incapacitated. Then you, as heir and agent, would have full control of my assets. All of it: accounts, real estate, shares, and the trust money." Daniel clutched his head, his voice breaking. "My God. She said if a doctor signed off that you showed signs of dementia, the court would do the rest. She said, 'You're old, no one would believe you anymore.'" I spoke softly, voice steady and steel cold. "You just signed a power of attorney this morning, remember? Do you know why I didn't object?" He looked up, eyes wet. You actually signed it?" I smiled, slowly opened the drawer, and took out the dummy POA Thomas had drafted. Thick paper, fresh ink. I set it before him and tapped the tiny line at the bottom: symbolic agreement in the amount of $1. Not valid for financial transactions exceeding personal limits. Daniel read it, shock spreading across his face. "My God, you tricked us." "No," I said quietly. "I just played the victim so they'd expose themselves. You're the one who signed, and that signature is evidence for the police." He slumped, voice choked. "I let her control me." "Mom, I'm sorry." I rested my hand on his shoulder, though my hand was still cold. "Son, blind love is a hard illness to cure. But unlike her, you still have a conscience, otherwise you wouldn't be crying today." He looked up, eyes wet. "What do you want me to do now?" "Take responsibility," I said. "By telling the truth." I pulled out my new will and the notarized trust documents. This is the final clause I added after working with Thomas. I pointed to the italic line. "In the event any individual attempts to prove I am legally incapacitated in order to seize control of my assets, the entire estate shall immediately transfer to charitable organizations and medical research funds." Daniel went still. His eyes stayed on that line a long time, as if reading his own sentence. "Mom, you've ruined my life," he whispered, almost shouting. "I'll have nothing left." I looked at him, voice low and slow. "No, Daniel, you ruined it yourself. I only stopped you from ruining me." The room was silent, only the wind at the window and the clock ticking. Daniel stared at the floor, tears wouldn't stop. I just wanted you to trust me again. I'm tired of you always being in control. Kendra was right, you never saw me as an adult. I sat and sighed. Maybe that's true. I always thought you needed protecting, like the 5-year-old who got lost at the mall. I didn't realize that by protecting you too much, I made you believe I was the enemy. He looked at me, lips trembling. Do you still forgive me? I didn't answer right away. I stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the pines in the distance. Late sun broke through thin clouds and reflected on the glass. Forgiveness, I whispered, is a gift I only give to those who can save themselves. Prove you deserve it. Daniel bowed his head and nodded. I'll cooperate with the police. Tell them everything. About Kendra, about Rooker. All of it. I turned back and smiled faintly, not bitter, just the smile of someone who has lived through too much loss. That's the only way you start over. That afternoon, Thomas Keegan arrived. He brought new papers to formalize Daniel's statement. When I handed him the dummy POA, he smiled, a trace of respect in his eyes. I told you, Miriam, you don't need to fear a confrontation, and clearly, you never did. I gave a small laugh and looked toward the window where sunlight poured into the room that had just witnessed the unvarnished truth. No, Thomas. I do know fear. I'm afraid of dying before I get to look straight at the real faces of the people I love. After Thomas left, I sat across from Daniel again. Between us, no more files, no more hiding, just two people, a mother and a son, and what was left after the storm. Daniel said softly, I'll leave town after I finish with the police. I need time to become myself again. I nodded. I hope so, and when you're ready, this door is still open. He looked around the house, eyes red. This used to be a home. I turned it into a battlefield. I took his hand, my voice gentler. Any battlefield can become peaceful again, Daniel. If the survivor learns to love without possession. When he left, I watched from the window. His shadow stretched across the wet grass path, fading into the midday light. I knew I'd just lost something, but I'd also reclaimed something more important, the truth. I opened my notebook and wrote the morning's last line. Those who thought they could deceive me didn't know their own lies would light up every dark corner. Today, the final mask fell. I closed the notebook and looked at the pines. The leaves trembled in the wind like a whisper from nature that justice, though slow, always arrives on time. 3 months later, fall had touched my small town with deep red leaves. The air carried a gentle chill, tinged with damp wood and leftover rain. But in my heart was another kind of cold, the cold of loss and endings. On sentencing day, I sat in the second row of the Fairfield County courtroom. It wasn't large, but it was packed. Reporters, neighbors, and strangers come out of curiosity. Camera shutters popped. On the big screen hung in the courtroom, the headline was clear. The Champagne poison case, my name, Miriam Blake, appeared beside it. Under that line was Kendra being led in hair messy, eyes empty, her old pride gone. When the judge read the sentence, his voice was even, emotionless. Kendra Blake, the court sentences you to 15 years in prison for attempted premeditated murder and elder abuse. Daniel Blake, accessory, 3 years in prison for conspiracy and willful concealment of a crime. The gavel hit the block like the sound of the past splintering. I sat motionless, not happy, not vindicated. Just a deep tiredness seeping through my bones, 30 years of motherhood, raising a child, teaching him decency, and in the end, I watched him leave court in handcuffs. Reporters rushed in, microphones up. Mrs. Blake, do you have anything to say about the verdict? I answered briefly, justice has done its part. The rest only time can heal. Then I walked out quietly. No one saw me shake. But the hand in my coat pocket was soaked with sweat. That afternoon I got a call, a clear, trembling voice on the other end. Grandma, it's Emma. I know everything now. I'm sorry I didn't know. If I had known, I would have said something. I swear. I closed my eyes. Emma, my 16-year-old granddaughter, the last light in my family. I held the phone and listened to her voice break into sobs. I wanted to say something comforting, but my throat locked. Only when I heard the tiny, "I still love you, Grandma," did my tears finally burn hot. "I love you too, Emma," I said. "It's not your fault. Don't ever think that." The call lasted only minutes, but to me it felt like a lifetime. When it ended, I sat still a long time, watching golden light slant across the wooden table. In that moment, I understood. Any nightmare, if told, can become a warning. In the days after, I started seeing Lorraine Kendra's mother again. She was thinner, grayer, but her voice was still soft as spring wind. We sat in a small corner cafe where light poured through the window onto two faces lined by years. Lorraine stirred her tea, voice low and sad. "I still can't believe. My own daughter did that." I looked at her, my eyes softening. I couldn't believe it either. "But the truth doesn't need our belief, it exists anyway." She gave a sad smile. "Sometimes I think, if only I'd taught her to know enough. To stop. Maybe it would have been different." I answered gently. "A mother's love can't save someone who chooses the dark, Lorraine. But it can save others, if we have the courage to tell the story." She looked at me, eyes brightening. "I want to write it all down. A book about financial abuse of the elderly, how family can turn into predators. Will you do it with me?" I smiled and nodded. If our story can help someone avoid a tragedy, then this pain isn't meaningless. Time passed. The town felt calm again, as if no scandal had ever happened. But every morning when I stepped into the rose garden, I still heard echoes of the past. The red roses Graham planted now bloomed bright, their scent strong, as if they knew I'd taken back my freedom, not just for me, but for those like me. I often sat beneath the pergola, breeze sifting through the leaves, with the old notebook that had followed me through this whole journey. Inside I wrote, "3 months have passed. Justice arrived late, but it arrived. Daniel is learning to face what he did. Kendra will have enough years to grasp the price of greed. And me, I'm learning to live again, not to get revenge, but to tell." One morning, Lorraine called, her voice happier than usual. "I just signed with a small publisher. The book will be called Broken Trusts: When Family Turns Against You." I smiled into the phone. Good title. In the end, trust is the most fragile thing, isn't it? "Yes," she said. "But also the strongest when we put it in the right place." That afternoon, I walked to the back garden. Sunset washed each petal in pink. I touched a new rosebud and thought of Emma. She emails me every week, telling me about school and friends, always ending with, "I'm studying law, Grandma. I want to protect people like you." Each time I read it, warmth spreads through me. I realized motherhood can fail in one generation, but if we have the courage to keep loving, it can be redeemed in the next. In the evening, I sat in the living room and looked up at an old family photo. Me, Daniel, Kendra, and little Emma. We were all smiling, summer sunlight pouring through the window behind us. I whispered to myself, sometimes life doesn't let us choose the ending, but we can choose how to tell it. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind on the porch. In that sound, I seemed to hear Graham's voice somewhere. "You're strong now, Miriam. Keep living, not to remember, but to light the way." I opened my eyes, drew a deep breath. Then I smiled. Before going to bed, I wrote the last lines in my journal. I don't regret protecting myself. I only regret that, to live, I had to lose the one who once called me Mom. But maybe survival is the only way a mother keeps loving through scars. I set down the pen and blew out the candle, leaving the scent of wax and roses hanging in the air. Outside, the night sky was crystal clear. The stars glittered like Emma's eyes, like Graham's, and like all the souls who walked through darkness and still chose the light. I smiled to myself. No darkness is permanent, only those who refused to open their eyes. And so, in the house that had seen scheming, tears, and justice, I turned off the lights and left one thing still shining: the belief that my story, once told, will save someone else. One March morning, Thomas Keegan called. His voice came warm and relieved through the phone. "Miriam, I've got good news. The insurance company voided Kendra's policy and refunded all the premiums. And one more thing. The bank just foreclosed on the house in Westfield where Daniel used to live. They couldn't keep it." I closed my eyes and took a long breath, not from joy, but because the last knot had finally untied. "So it's done, Thomas?" I asked. "It's done," he said, steady. "Your trust is finalized too. I added the special clause you requested. If anyone tries to declare you legally incapacitated, the entire estate immediately transfers to charities. No one can touch a single cent." I gave a small laugh. Ironic, isn't it? They thought they could steal assets with legal tricks, and the law is exactly what protects me. Thomas chuckled. "Justice sides with the clear-minded Miriam. You're living proof." Now my life has settled back into peace. The old house is updated, with a private security system and 2 guards rotating shifts. Every month, Thomas and his legal team review all my accounts and investments. I don't worry about money anymore. I just live and breathe the air of free days. In the mornings, I sit by the window, listen to sparrows chattering on the eaves, and drink coffee from the porcelain cup Graham bought on our first trip together. Each time the roasted aroma rises, it reminds me every loss can be mended by awakening. That afternoon, I got a message from Emma. My phone lit up, the little line clear on the screen. "Grandma, I got into Northwestern University's law program. I did it just like you dreamed." I laughed and tears slipped out before I knew it. "That girl," I whispered. "She chose the light in a story full of shadows." I texted back, "I'm proud of you. Learn to use the law to protect the vulnerable, not to condemn, but to guide." Watching the message send, I felt light as a crane. Maybe that's the real meaning of justice, not only punishing the wicked, but planting good for the next generation. That evening, I went to the garden. Dusk fell softly on the rows of roses Graham had planted. After a long winter, they were in full bloom, crimson, proud and alive. I walked slowly past each bed, my hand brushing petals soft as velvet. To me, every rose is a witness. They stood there when I was betrayed, when I won back justice, and now when I chose forgiveness. I sat on the wooden bench in the garden and watched the sky turn purple. Crickets chirped in the distance, mixed with the earthy scent of damp soil. I smiled softly and spoke as if to myself, "I'm telling this story not to stir up hate, but to remind you, being old doesn't mean being powerless. We can still stand up, fight, and protect ourselves with our wits, our courage, and the truth." I looked up at the night sky. Stars began to appear, glittering in the stillness. In that moment, I seemed to hear Graham whisper, "You did the right thing, Miriam. You survived not by luck, but because you never let go of yourself." I smiled and answered softly, "I know. And I'll keep living not for the past, but for those who need to hear this story. I've walked through fear, loss, and betrayal to learn one thing. Age doesn't make us weaker, it makes us clearer. If you're listening to me now, maybe you've been dismissed, hurt, or pushed aside just because you're a little older. But remember, we're not useless. We simply have more experience than the ones who tried to bring us down. Today, I want to thank you for taking the time to walk through this journey with me. Thank you for staying with me through each pain, each ray of hope, and each time I stood back up. If my story touched your heart, leave a comment, tell me where you are, and whether you've lived something similar. I want to know that strong people are never alone. And if you believe in justice, in the light, in human renewal, please hit like, subscribe, and come back for the next stories. Because sometimes, a single story told, a single shared word, can save another life.